Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and it's time for part 2 of the Q&As, so let's go ahead and knock this out. Alright, first question. Does progressive overload even work after noob gains? You said in a recent video that going from curling 10-pound dumbbells to 40-pound dumbbells should give you bigger arms. I see 14-inch arms regularly curling 50-plus pound dumbbells. It seems drugs are the only things that pack on muscle after years of training. All right, brother, there's some truth to your statement in the sense that after years of training, yeah, the only thing that's going to pack on significant amounts of muscle is going to be drugs. That's absolutely true. Every year that you train, you're going to see diminished returns. What I mean by diminished returns, if you trained and got most of the gains you could have gotten a year, doesn't have to be all of them, just a good chunk. Like you got at least 80% of what you could have gained at the most optimal or maximum amount. You know that 100%, let's say you got 80 or 90% of what that potential 100% is, you're probably going to see 50% or less gains the following year. So if you gained X amounts of muscle in year one, you're probably going to gain half or less, sometimes a bit less than half the next year. The year after that, again, cut it in half again. And it's normal. You see diminished returns, and that's actually a perfect diminished return that we see. Like it's actually plottable on charts. If you were to study 20 people's gains, you would see the same basic pattern established. So yeah, you don't pack on tons of muscle. But as far as the other thing goes, you know, the thing is, these guys who are doing these 40-pound dumbbells with 15-inch arms, they're probably doing cheat curls. And like you said, with bad form, and that's the thing to remember, when it comes to progressive overload, I don't think we can overlook the fact that we're talking about with the same form. So when you start cheat curling, it's hard to say how much cheating and how much English you're putting on it when you swing the weight up. So if it's not a strict curl, we don't really know if you're increasing overload by how much. Meaning you might go from a 20-pound dumbbell to a 40, but if you're cheating 20% more, you didn't double, you only increased the load by about 80%. You know, so it's really hard to judge that. And just like someone else had asked me the other day in a comment about, well, progressive overload, I mean, what about the guys who they start arching further on their bench press and they grip it wider and wider to get the range of motion down to add more to the max? They're having progressive overload. They're not. We're talking about while using the same form, the same range of motion and so on and so forth by increasing overload on that. If you're doing something besides using the muscle that you're trying to work, and even in the deadlift has certain muscles it works. You know, it has certain muscles that are the primary movers, just like a curl has only one muscle that's a primary mover. The deadlift has many, but they have target muscles. When you start removing that muscle being the primary mover by using cheating or by reducing range of motion so that those muscles do less work with the same weight, increasing weight by doing it that way isn't progressive overload anymore. It's using cheating technique or range of motion to lift more weight. It's not the same thing. Progressive overload is actually loading the muscles themselves with more work. So you have to understand the difference. So yeah, I do know what you're talking about with these guys with small arms who are curling 40-pound dumbbells with bad form. Those same guys would probably be better off if they tightened up their form a little bit and dropped down to 25s or 30s. And it's not because I think light weights build better muscle. I think that for an isolation movement, if you're going to bother to do an isolation movement, you're probably going to get better development if you actually use good form and use the actual target muscle to lift at least 90% of the weight. Just throwing it out there, you're probably going to get a little better results if you do that. Just saying. But yeah, progressive overload still works. But you know what you're going to notice as you get more and more advanced, you progress less on your overload also. There's a direct proportion there between that and the reduced gains on muscle. You know, look at the strength curve. It's the same way. You know, if you added 200 pounds to your bench press in the first year, odds are you're only going to add 100 in the second year at most. And then the following year, you'll be lucky to get 50. And it's all just diminished returns, and that's just the nature of the game. We have to live with it. That's, again, why people end up going to drugs, because they do things that we can't do otherwise. They give us shortcuts. They give us a curve. They give us an edge. And if they didn't do that and they weren't so fantastic at doing it, no one would bother to use them and deal with the side effects, the costs, and the risk, right? You know, it makes sense. All right, next question. Jason, if you had to pick one, which would lend more to strength and aesthetics, the pull-up or the bent-over row? Thanks kindly, as always. Good question. I love both. The question becomes, though, which is better for strength and aesthetics? Well, that's a tricky question because strength is a relative term. They're both equal for strength, but if you mean full body power, the row is probably going to be a little bit better. When it comes to aesthetics, chin-ups and pull-ups are going to be slightly better. And it's because of what people consider to be aesthetics versus what we're talking about with full body power. Now, if you're doing a bunch of deadlifts, the full body power benefits from rows might be dramatically diminished, and you might be better off just doing a chin-up or a pull-up, because the extra power that you get from the rows comes from the fact that they work the traps more, they work the thoracic erectors more, and they work the spinal erectors more. Those are definitely go muscles instead of show muscles, right? But they're going to give you a lot more power because they're both lat dominant exercises. They both use your biceps, brachialis, rear delts, most of your back, your lats. Those are all of the big movers in both of those sets of exercises, right? But the row lends itself more to those other secondary muscles as muscles that get worked very, very heavily during the exercise when compared to a pull-up or a chin-up. Pull-ups and chin-ups, conversely, tend to work the arms a little better. They also, for many guys, tend to work the rear delts just a little bit better. So you see where I'm going with this. What muscles are your show muscles? What muscles do people think of as aesthetic muscles? Biceps, brachialis, delts. Well, you're getting a little better delt development. Not a lot, arguably not more. Depends on the person, but maybe a little more rear delt. Well, rear delt's going to give you a little more side aesthetics. But generally, aesthetics are thought of as how guys look from the front. That's mostly what the aesthetics world is concerned with. Well, chin-ups in particular, but pull-ups also, but definitely chin-ups. And that includes even for pull-ups when you do hammer grip pull-ups. There's good data showing that the parallel grip pull-ups actually work the biceps and brachialis better than most exercises out there. So again, chin-ups and pull-ups have the potential to be a better arm exercise than the rows are. Well, big arms. Even when you're in a t-shirt, a big brachialis tends to really, really stand out. So guys who are chasing aesthetics, if I had to pick only one, you put a gun to my one of my loved ones' head and say, if you have to tell people to do one of these, it has to be for aesthetics. You know, what's going to give them the most bang for their buck? I'm going to have to go with that. It's just, if you could only do one. And I think both are great exercises. I think people who really want a good balance of strength and aesthetics should probably consider doing both. But if you have to pick one to be dominant in one of these things, I'm going to go in the direction of a hammer grip pull-up or a chin-up for the aesthetic end, just because, again, aesthetics tend to be arm and shoulder dominant, and that exercise is slightly more arm and shoulder dominant. And if we're talking about full body head to toe explosive power, the rows give you more strength than the pull-ups or chin-ups do in those muscles that are really important for power, the traps, the thoracic erectors, and the spinal erectors. So I'm going to have to give it the edge there. So it's, kind of a complicated question, and I don't like being thrown in that position of saying if you have to pick one exercise for this, pick one. But if you're going to force me to do so, that's the direction I'm going to go in that particular question. All right, next question. What about the leucine content and protein synthesis? If your protein intake is so low, then you won't reach the leucine threshold to stimulate protein synthesis, because you can eat 100 grams of protein without eating any meat at all, just from the byproducts of carbs and fats. Could you go into detail on this? I see a lot of people eating 300 or so grams a day. All right, let's go into this leucine stuff a little bit. This is something, I don't know, that almost needs its own video, but seriously, guys, all this leucine data out there, this is only being discussed in the bodybuilding world. Do you know why it's being discussed in the bodybuilding world? Because we have one public figure who is an employee of supplement companies who, by the way, has sued me over this while living abroad. And by the way, that same case would absolutely be thrown out of court in Texas, and the Texas courts would have fined that individual and made them pay me money for even filing the case, even after they threw it out, by the way. And yes, my lawyer said that here. But I live in a different country with different free speech laws. And so, this individual sued me over even saying that, but he works for supplement companies. No one outside of the bodybuilding world cares about Lane's research on all this leucine stuff. Yes, leucine is important for anabolic drive. Do we need to be taking huge amounts of leucine in order to reach it? No. You got to remember, he works for a company whose primary product, their highest selling product's primary ingredient is leucine. He has a vested financial interest in talking about it all the time. For most people, you got to think about it this way. There is leucine in all your food. It's not just animal source proteins. Yes, whey protein and dairy tends to be fairly high in leucine, higher in leucine per percentage than other proteins. But that doesn't mean other products don't have them. It doesn't mean beans don't have leucine. It doesn't mean wheat protein doesn't have leucine. It's in other foods. And if you're consuming enough protein, which again, the 1 to 1.6 grams per kilogram of body weight, and you're eating, 3 balanced sized meals a day. Let's say you're getting at least 3 meals a day to where you're getting around a third of your protein in each one, you're going to reach your anabolic threshold for the leucine. It's not going to be a problem. This stuff has been overhyped because of this one individual's research in the bodybuilding world. It is not a big issue if you're consuming enough leucine. And the only time people are wanting to talk about it like that is so that they can get you to supplement extra leucine between meals, trying to get that anabolic drive, because you're trying to chase a 0.5% advantage. And that's what you need to remember. The same individual who did this research has admitted this is all about chasing a 0.5% advantage in a competitive environment. That's what he's talking about. He's not even talking about the average Joe who thinks they're going to gain 10% or 20% more muscle from it. It's not even intended for that when he discusses it, when he actually admits what's really going on with the data. You're talking about trying to hit leucine thresholds for anabolic drive multiple times a day so that you can hopefully gain a 0.5% more muscle or strength every year. We're not talking about very noticeable amounts. So, keep that in perspective, guys. All right, next question. Regarding low testosterone. I've recently had my test levels taken at 150 nanograms per deciliter. Remember, guys, normal is around 400 to 500. I'm just throwing this in. That's not his question. Even though the normal range is 300 to 1,000, most healthy men are between 400 and 500, the vast majority. All right, back to his question. I have had an MRI on my pituitary gland and all is in good health. Also, my other blood markers show no abnormalities. However, I have been cutting for the last 12 weeks with fairly low fat intake, 50 grams a day, with the saturated fat at 15 grams. Could the calorie deficit as well as the low fat intake cause my test to be so low? If so, is this reversible? All right, perfect question. And this goes back to my point talking about the blood work of these pre-contest bodybuilders. If you're in a caloric deficit for an extended period of time and you get either too lean and or you're on too low of a fat diet, it is going to crash a lot of your hormone levels. It is going to harm your health. The person asking this question has learned this the hard way. They can't find anything else wrong with his body, but his testosterone levels are about a third of the normal healthy range for a young man. He's producing a third of the testosterone it should be producing. Why? Especially when his pituitary gland is okay and assuming his testicles are okay, because he starved himself. It's that simple. Prolonged cutting in 12 weeks is a pretty prolonged cut. If you started it at a decently healthy body fat and you're trying to get ripped, or you run an ultra low fat diet, 50 grams of fat's pretty low, and you're in a calorie deficit. It's one thing to run a really low fat diet if you're getting your essential fatty acids and you're eating enough to gain weight or at least maintain your body weight. It's not going to have the same negative effects, but once you go into a caloric deficit, that ultra low fat can crash your hormone levels, not just your testosterone. This person's lucky he hasn't had other hormones start cratering also. Keep doing it past that 12 weeks, go another 12, and you'll start seeing all sorts of other problems develop as well. It won't be just your testosterone. So again, this is a case of dietary deficiency. This is a case of people when they cut too lean, or they, again, go on some sort of deficient diet, which is, again, most people who cut to get ultra ripped do. They tend to do both. You see crashed testosterone levels. This is normal. This is what happens. They're bad for you. You shouldn't do this. Now, to the person, is it reversible? 90% of the time, yes, it is. Maybe 1 in 10, it might not be. There have been guys who've done contest preps who've had to go on TRT. In fact, if you guys remember, Mark Lobliner talked about that in a video, that one of his guys who they came to him, who another coach had prepped, they ran his dietary fat too low for too long, and he had to go on TRT. His levels didn't return to normal. But most guys, it will. What you need to do, you need to bulk back up. You need to add more fat to your diet, go up to about 80 or 90, maybe 100 grams of fat a day, and you need to bulk up again. You need to go back over 10% body fat. If you're at 8% or 9% body fat now, you need to go up to about 10, I'd go past 10%, go up to about 11 or 12% body fat, and your testosterone levels will be normal again. Again, stop trying to cut so lean. If you're concerned about your health or you're concerned about your testosterone production, you don't need to be getting ripped. It's stupid. It's the worst thing you can do. And this whole idea, well, I want to look good. Well, looking good if you can't get a hard on doesn't mean anything. What are you going to do? Attract girls and then, rub your limp penis on them? That's what getting ripped is going to do for you. It's completely useless and it's stupid. So you can reverse it by regaining some body weight and some body fat and adding a little fat back into your diet. All right, next question. Jason, I saw this video about concurrent training and I still don't really know exactly what it is. How come I can't find much about this at all on YouTube, and why haven't I heard it mentioned ever before? What is your opinion on this? All right, in order to know what concurrent training is, you need to understand what normal training is, what standard linear type training is, or linear periodization. Periodization is usually done to where you do different rep ranges and energy systems in different blocks, generally up to 3-week-long blocks. Like standard block periodization, you might be doing 12 rep sets for 3 weeks, then you might do 8 rep sets for 3 weeks, then 5 rep sets for 3 weeks, and then 3 rep sets for 3 weeks. That could be a standard linear periodization block, and that's some of the way most professional athletes have trained around the world for a very long time. Football players, Russian Olympic lifters, everybody else. I mean, it's a very standard way to train. Again, plenty of champions have trained that way. There's different types of periodization to where you rotate it around through the weeks, but concurrent training is usually to where you train more than one style or rep range or type of volume in the same week. Concurrent training could be like undulating periodization, or to where you have higher rep, higher volume days, like say maybe Thursday and Friday on an upper lower split, you do higher volume with 8 to 12 reps. And then you might do 3 to 5 for more of a slightly strength to power range with less volume, maybe 1 to 3 work sets on Monday and Tuesday on a different upper lower split. And that's one way to do it. Or you might have like the West Side Barbell Conjugate method, which is also a form of concurrent training, to where in the same week you have max effort days. You'll run 2 max effort days, one based around the squat and the deadlift, and the other based around your bench press, and then associated accessories. And then you have other days where you work on dynamic effort work, which is speed work. Again, one day dedicated to the bench and its accessories, and the other day to squat and deadlift. That's West Side Barbell style training. Both of those examples are considered to be concurrent training. Concurrent training is generally more useful for in-season athletes, whereas in linear style training, linear style periodization is usually used in the off-season. So it really depends on what you're trying to do. Where are the benefits to it? Athletes who need to maintain multiple performance endeavors at the same time, meaning things that they've peaked in the past and run through different blocks and phases, they need to maintain them all together without progressing necessarily as fast on them. Now, people would argue like West Side Barbell that they still progress, and they do, but their point is they want their guys to be able to do a powerlifting meet with 1 week notice at any point in the year, so that they can peak and be ready 1 week out at any point to jump immediately into a meet. So they run a concurrent style training so that they're always basically in meet prep. So that's one example of why they do it, even though they do it year round. But generally, concurrent training should be, I feel, is best used for in-season athletes or in the middle of their competitive season. And if you want to make better progress through the year, I think block-style periodization usually lends itself to better progress over time. So hopefully that clarifies what's going on there. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.